DarkScape, a highly experimental project by Jagex that only lasted a few short months before suddenly closing. What is it? Why did it disappear so suddenly? And what led to its downfall? In this episode of Abandoned by RuneScape, we'll talk about that and so much more. Anyway, let's get started. So, first off, what exactly is DarkScape? I think PC game writer Kirk McKean sums it up pretty well by saying, DarkScape is RuneScape with griefing turned up to the max. DarkScape was launched on the 16th of September 2015. A few of its key features included wilderness rules everywhere, 3 separate economies with low to high risk regions, the large majority of RuneScape's content completely free, members gaining 2 times the amount of XP as normal with free to play not too far behind that, combat was legacy mode only, and everyone starts with a fresh account. Those of you who have played Deadman mode may recognize quite a few of these features. Deadman actually released just a few months after DarkScape, but was announced beforehand. When DarkScape launched, it seemed like an odd little experiment. As the news post says, we've launched DarkScape in a raw formative state, so it can be driven from the earliest possible point by its community. The game seemed to be a few months behind the main game, and a few things were a little broken. For example, some NPC models glitched out whenever you attacked them. Some of these things never really did end up getting fixed either. Regardless, the launch was also a pretty quiet one. Jagex kept the whole project under wraps while they worked on it. The first day of launch, about 40,000 players gave the game a shot. It appeared to be a pretty massive success for something that had literally no advertisement. But even from day one, it was evident the game had quite a few of its own issues. The same day the game released, what is now the most popular post on the subreddit was posted. It was a huge post about how the game's combat was completely flawed in its current form. Along with this, there were loads of smaller issues. One of them being how easy it was to accidentally attack someone at banks due to left-click attack always being on. You try to bank, accidentally attack another player, and get killed by guards immediately. I personally remember almost rage quitting after this happened to me a couple times in a row. Along with this, it was extremely easy to get killed at a bank with absolutely no consequences for your attacker. Players would lure the guards away, and others could attack anyone they wanted with ease. The team of JMods working on the game heard these concerns and quickly got to work. Just barely a week after that post about the combat system, they were already proposing ideas to the players on how they could fix it. They even went as far as removing core features the game had since launch if players disliked them. For example, as I mentioned earlier, the game had 3 separate economies. This meant you had 3 separate banks and 3 separate grand exchanges. You could only access your low-risk bank and exchange in low-risk areas such as Lumbridge. You couldn't access them in places like Ardone, for example. You could transfer items between tiers, but that would mean trips on foot running back and forth to each zone. This system really started to have issues as the game shrunk. As a result of players' feedback, it was just completely removed. Updates seemed to be coming quickly and improving the game based on players' feedback. The game's community was small but strong, filled with dozens of easily recognizable clan names. About a half a year after launch, it still had its issues, but it was absolutely improving. Then the updates just seemed to stop. Just complete radio silence. Players started to get a little bit worried. A few months later, Jagex posted a news post titled "The Status of DarkScape," with the bulk of it explaining to players that the game would be closing in less than a month. Now, the question is why? Why so sudden? That I'll explain in the next section. Depending on who you ask, DarkScape closed for a different reason. But for the most part, it all boils down to one central issue: the lack of a player base. Many believe that the problem started from the community, as it became even more toxic as time went on. This Reddit commenter describes what they believe to be the game's ultimate downfall. It's quite long, so I'll summarize it just a little bit. The comment essentially says that a lot of the game's issues were simply never fixed. Jagex staff completely stopped responding to posts. The weapons were still OP. Players could risk nothing and get massive rewards. Clans began DDoSing each other. Low-level players were discouraged from playing by high-level players. Guards could still be lured away. And lastly, a game with the motto "cheat your way to the top" would ban users for abusing a troll invasion bug. These are the issues that led to the game losing a large chunk of its player base. Some would return to old school, some to RS3, and others just quit altogether. As a result, this obviously caused Jagex to lose money. As less and less people played DarkScape, the servers became more and more expensive to keep up. While this was happening, Jagex still had to pay staff members to work on updates for the game, which, as more players quit, became an even bigger loss of money. Ultimately, the game closed because not enough people were playing it anymore, which stems from issues with the gameplay. When Jagex did eventually make the decision to close the game, it all happened fairly quickly. Players had a little less than a month of warning, but they did get answers to a lot of their questions. Before closing it, they definitely considered a number of options, one of them even being ramping up development tenfold. In the end, closing it still seemed like the most reasonable option for Jagex. Looking at the numbers, it makes a lot of sense. A month after DarkScape launched, the amount of new players who would stay after logging in for the first time was 1.7%. That means out of 100 players, not even 2 would stay. As a result of this, sustainability became the game's biggest issue. In the FAQ, Jagex states that in order for DarkScape to stay live with just one server and no updates, it would need 10 times what it was currently making. Now, this all makes sense, but why close it so quickly? Nobody has a certain answer, but the main theory is because the DarkScape servers were supposedly hosted on the same ones used for RuneScape 3 betas. For example, when the Evolution of Combat was launched, they supposedly used those same servers to test it. People believe that they rushed the closing of DarkScape so they could use the servers to beta test RuneScape 3's NXT client. At the same time, Jagex had already ran another beta for NXT while DarkScape was live. Even though it's just a theory as for why it closed so quickly, in the end we all know why it was closed in the first place. It was just sad to see something that a lot of people were passionate about disappear so quickly. While it was live, the game had a very small community, but they were seriously dedicated to it. Even now, with it almost being the 1-year anniversary of DarkScape's closing, dozens of players continue to post on the subreddit about it, almost daily at this point. I don't think there's much that can be done now, but they continue to push for its revival and search for alternatives. If you want to reminisce on old times or possibly reconnect with old clanmates, I think the subreddit is the best place to do that. Overall, DarkScape was fun while it lasted, even though it was up less than a year. All I hope for now is that Jagex does more experimental content like this in the future, hopefully something that's more successful and sustainable. So, I hope you all enjoyed that video. If so, check out the rest of the Abandoned by RuneScape series, as I'm sure you'll love those videos too. Before you do that, be sure to drop a like and leave your thoughts below. If you have any old DarkScape memories you'd like to share, feel free to talk about them in the comments. Regardless of what you do, I'll see you in the next one.